Hey there, this is Precious. It is important that we know what ID and class in CSS means because we will be using them a lot in our CSS journey. An ID is an HTML attribute that is used to specify a unique ID for an element. That is to say, no other element in your document can share the same ID. The ID makes an element unique and the ID has to be unique. The HTML class attribute is used to specify a class for an HTML element. But here, multiple HTML elements can share the same class. So the difference between a class and an ID, a class can be used by multiple elements, but an ID can only be used by one element within the page or document. So let's see this in action. Let's assume we have series of heading tags. So I would create an h2 tag, call it HTML and CSS class. Then I duplicate this. Oh, I love this. So if you want to give this an ID, you go inside of the tag, the opening tag, and type ID equal to. So let's give it an ID. Let's call it first heading. And we can give this a class. Remember, there can only be one element with one ID type in our document, but we can have multiple classes. So we can give this a class called heading, and we can also give this a class called heading. So you see, we can use the same class for two different elements, but we can only use one ID for one element. So if I want to give this an ID, I have to give it another ID. Even if I want to use the same name, maybe first heading, I have to make it unique, maybe by adding 2 to it. So that is all on HTML. That's all on CSS if you want to give an ID or a class to your element. It is important we know this because we will be using this when we get to CSS selectors. Thank you.